Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Well, shortly after the Philadelphia Eagles punched their ticket to Super Bowl 59, reports started that the Saints plan to interview Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore up in Philadelphia. Obviously, he's got a lot of matters to attend to, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. The Saints hopped on a plane. Saints brass hopped on a plane. They went up to Philadelphia, and Monday night interviewed Kellen Moore. As a matter of fact, our Ross Jackson from LouisianaSports.net filed his report at 12:25 a.m. So that interview was Monday night and into Tuesday morning with Kellen Moore, but the Saints have since completed that interview in person. So now we know Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins defensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, the Giants offensive coordinator, and Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator, are the three candidates that have completed in-person interviews, in addition to Darren Rizzi, the Saints interim head coach. So that's the four. The expectation is that former coach, Cowboys coach Mike McCarthy, will have his in-person interview with the New Orleans Saints later this week. However, there was a report on Monday evening that the Saints were, quote, not enamored with McCarthy in the early conversations that they've had. So we'll see what may manifest there. You know, I find it interesting with Kellen Moore because he is now the odds-on favorite to become the Saints' next head coach. And Kellen Moore does check the boxes that I had kind of imposed early in this process, where I said I wanted a young, offensive-minded coach with no ties to the Saints organization, and preferably from the Shanahan-McVay tree. So you don't get that component of it directly, but you do get all the other check marks there. Kellen Moore is a young offensive-minded coach who's never been a head coach before, and he has obviously been the play caller in Dallas and now is the play caller in Philadelphia. I don't know that necessarily anything that went wrong or maybe didn't go right, perhaps the way to say it, in Dallas was his fault necessarily, but he was ousted after 2022, spent one season with the Chargers in 2023. Of course, Brandon Staley was not retained, so he was looking for a job, and now in Philadelphia for this season. It certainly helps in Philadelphia when you're calling plays and you can turn around and hand the ball to Saquon Barkley, as Paul told us yesterday. Good running back. Gets a lot of yards. You can hand the ball to Saquon Barkley. You can throw it to Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. It's a good offense. I don't suspect that it's too hard to call plays with all that talent. It would be a decidedly different experience calling plays in New Orleans with this hodgepodge of average to bad for the New Orleans Saints. But again, Kellen Moore looks like he is now the front runner to get that job. One thing Ross Jackson mentioned here on Monday that was interesting is the longer this goes, the more likely it is that they hire someone else. Because the truth is, if they wanted to hire Kellen Moore, like if they were blown away with that interview, hire him. Now, you couldn't formally announce it until after the Super Bowl, but you could have Saints likely to hire Kellen Moore, and that would be the deal. But the longer this goes on, it tells you they want to talk in person with Mike McCarthy. Maybe it is Cliff Kingsbury that they want to have a conversation with as well, that his season's over in Washington. I guess when I look at Kellen Moore, he does, as I said, check a lot of those boxes, but I don't know if that's the necessary wow factor that you might have gotten with some other coaches or candidates. I went back and checked. So there were some early odds for who would be the next Saints head coach. And I went back and looked on December the 19th. So this is a little more than a month ago. On December the 19th, there were 16 names that had odds to be the Saints head coach. Kellen Moore was not one of the 16. A little more than a month ago, he wasn't even on the list. 5 days ago, there were 7 names on that list. Now, Joe Brady was at the top of the list. And, of course, then on Saturday night, Joe Brady withdrew from consideration. Of the 7 names, Kellen Moore was 6th of the 7 when it came to odds. So all that to say, at no point during this process until now has Kellen Moore been or perceived to have been the favorite to land this job. But as we know, you didn't land Aaron Glenn. Joe Brady pulled out of the process. So the guys who we all thought were at the top of your list aren't going to be there. So what do you do next? I mean, you got to hire someone. But I would also say, are you rushing with Kellen Moore? Like, did one game against the Washington Commanders all of a sudden dramatically elevate his star to where you go, yep, that's our guy? And I don't know that I could definitively say that. The longer this goes on, the thing that becomes more appealing to me is the thing that I've floated a few times that I don't think the Saints are actually going to consider, but I do think would be the best path forward here, which is to retain Darren Rizzi for 1 year. Now, you don't retain Darren Rizzi and tell him he's being hired for 1 year, and you don't go into it with that intention, because what if he has a great season? Awesome. Well, then he keeps the job. But when I look at the Saints, there's just so much that's very obviously going against New Orleans here. And a lot of it that could be rectified for 2026. You have no dead money on the books right now for 2026. You have about $60 million in cap space for 2026. Now, that's going to change because you're going to have to do some contract restructuring, and that number is going to come down, but you're going to be closer to even, or could potentially be closer to even for 2026 on the salary cap. I think you'll probably have a top 5 pick because you're going to be really bad in 2025. And so the same way that the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce and fired him after 1 season and got Pete Carroll, or New England hired Gerard Mayo internally, fired him after 1 season, landed on Mike Vrabel. Maybe the same thing Dallas is doing right now with Brian Schottenheimer. We'll see if maybe next year they're in the market again. I just think a year from now, the Saints' job is more attractive to a potential candidate. So why not have Darren Rizzi be, in essence, a lame duck coach, a sacrificial lamb to just steer the ship into this storm that's coming in 2025. And then when you find calmer seas in 2026, you go hire your speedboat captain, whoever's going to take you and take that thing, you hope, to the moon. I don't think that's what Mickey Loomis and the Saints brass are thinking right now, but that seems like a more plausible option. Playing a long-term game instead of thinking you're going to get this right for 2025, because I don't know that Kellen Moore is the guy the Saints. It feels like they'd be settling. You got to hire somebody, so Kellen Moore, okay. When 5 weeks ago he wasn't even on your list, and now he's the guy. Look, that can reveal itself through the process. So we'll see what ultimately they do. We'll see if Cliff Kingsbury agrees to an interview, if the Saints want to interview him, if they do, in fact, interview Mike McCarthy. Kellen Moore just said no?
Kingsbury.
Oh, Kingsbury
looking
just
at the
said
report
no. Okay.
right now. Yeah,
okay, so Kingsbury. Okay, so Kingsbury is a no-go. So you're not going to go forward with Cliff Kingsbury. So that's another name off your list. I don't know how realistic that was to begin with, but now you'd in theory be down to those two: Moore, McCarthy, Rizzi, or Weaver Kafka, who have already interviewed. I mean, that's not exactly a list that instills a ton of confidence in what direction your organization might be heading. So if it is Kellen Moore, it's what it is. We'll talk about it when it happens, but if it happens. But I am leaning more and more toward the feeling of, hey, look, retain Rizzi, go into the tank for a year, just take your medicine, go through the storm, understand what it's going to be, and then next year you'll be in a healthier situation to find the right person long-term who could hopefully bring you back to being a competitor or in a contender. But it ain't right now. And I don't know that it's Kellen Moore. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.